The game takes place sometime around 1895 in the Louisiana swamps, and as such, the events recorded then have the most clarity. While the further we delve into the past, the murkier things get. The recordings of the lore itself were compiled at an unspecified date in the future. Reports of a plague outbreak started cropping up. Rumor had it there was a massive outbreak of some sort of yellow fever. People became restless and panicked to the point the governor of Louisiana, Murphy J. Foster, was forced to address the rumors in a public announcement. He referred to the plague as fragrant speculation and blamed criminals, anarchists, the poor and the uneducated. He said they were trying to spread fear among the population, specifically targeting the following year's election. The governor assured the people they had nothing to fear and business would proceed as normal. But there definitely was something to fear. The plague the governor so blatantly disregarded not only killed its victims, but also reanimated them afterwards. There was even a theory that the victims did not die, but were taken over by the plague anyway, forced to watch helplessly as their bodies did gruesome acts against their will. This was not the workings of a yellow fever. What most didn't know is this plague did not appear around 1895, but a whole 300 years earlier, right at the time of the formation of the American Hunters Association. In fact, the plague is what prompted the formation to begin with. In order for a hunter to join the American Hunters Association, they had to pass an initiation ritual. This included swearing an oath of secrecy, as well as ingesting a special serum. This serum was meant to protect them from the plague and grant them certain benefits which aided with combating it. For over 200 years, the American Hunters Association was quite successful at dealing with it, which seemed no more than a few walking corpses. In fact, the American Hunters Association was so successful that people around America were not even aware of the horrors happening. Until that massive outbreak at the tail end of the 1800s. However, I believe it actually wasn't the American Hunters Association who were responsible for such heightened secrecy. An indigenous population, specifically the Chitimaca, played a key role in suppressing the bulk of the plague. They seemed to know the true nature of it all and were able to contain it, only occasionally letting minor outbreaks slip through in the form of those few walking corpses which the American Hunters Association dealt with. After war and conflict between the early French and Spanish colonizers and the indigenous people, the Chitimaca population was nearly annihilated. The remaining few were forced into slavery. This coincides with an increasing amount of plague outbreaks, until, during the summer of 1895, we have our very first recorded proof of the American Hunters Association turning to indigenous hunters for help against the mounting threats of the corruption within the Louisiana bayous. It must be noted, sometime in the mid-1800s, the Chitimaca sued and successfully reclaimed the rights to their lands. However, even after that, they continued to be victims of oppression and were removed from their lands against their will. By the late 1800s, it seemed their ability to contain the plague had waned below the threshold. Like cancer kept dormant by treatment, the plague erupted into activity due to the absence of the indigenous. One of the consequences of the post-dormancy eruption was the appearance of the first major bounty, the assassin. The timing is too much of a coincidence for the assassin's appearance to be unrelated to the explosion of plague activity. Officially, the spider is recorded to have appeared earlier, but that is only because for a long time, no assassin witnesses remained alive long enough to tell their tale. The assassin's human form was recognized by Harold Black during the famous Italian-American lynching for the murder of the New Orleans police chief, David Hennessy. The human form Vincent Orsica and Harold Black were very close friends. It is believed Vincent was working to hasten the plague's awakening. Many people were assassinated around Harold Black, but it wasn't until his own party was brutally murdered by the assassin that he realized his friend Vincent was the assassin. Harold Black joined the American Hunters Association soon after. The origins of the spider come much later. Dr. Reed was a doctor who went to the bayou to treat what he thought was a flu outbreak. Without realizing the true colors of this once dormant plague, he eventually got infected and transformed into a grunt. He killed his fellow survivors and consumed them. Whatever was left of them was later buried by a hunter named John Victor, also known as John Vogel. The mass of bodies in the grave soon rose as the major bounty we now know as the spider. At some point, reports of a new threat started spreading: the meathead. The meathead was born to a female hunter as a byproduct of the serum given to hunters during the initiation ritual. After this, the American Hunters Association used a new, updated version of the serum. It was given to Dr. Philip Huff Jones, the director of the American Hunters Association, by an individual named Lynch. Lynch is fascinating. She's a hunter with a clear understanding of the occult. She seems to be aware of the sculptor. Moreover, she seems to have a clear idea of the sculptor's endgame. She, of course, has her own agenda and is actively pursuing it alone behind the scenes. Another important pawn within our story is a certain individual that went by the name of William Salter. He was admitted to the Louisiana Asylum at Jackson's, in which Dr. Philip Huff Jones was acting as superintendent. Within William Salter's journal, we discover that Dr. Huff had administered a certain injection we believe is the very same as what the hunters received during the initiation ritual. Dr. Huff had likely taken wind of the unnatural transformation of the grunts and was likely experimenting on William Salter for further information. William Salter's transformation into a grunt was the slowest on record, very likely due to the serum. Around this time, a new threat and major bounty appears within the BIOS. A certain taxidermist named Ariel Denoy and his pursuit of fame and glory worked on increasingly extreme subjects. His final subject was the body of a meathead he found. Having finished his work, he covered the body with an apron and covered the head whole with a swine's head because even to him it appeared menacing. He disappeared that stormy night, after which the butcher appeared. His body was found later and identified only by his glass eye. Scrapbeak was the latest major bounty to make its appearance. It morphed from a human, a war veteran named Avis Winham. Avis came back home from war having lost more than just his leg. He lost a piece of his mind and became a different man. He developed a fascination with collecting broken things from all over the bayou, until one day he disappeared and Scrapbeak appeared. Around this time, the first ever recorded appearance of a pack of infected working together was witnessed by Dr. Huff and his men. This is a major turning point within our story, for before this night the hunts were rare and sparse. Grunts had never appeared in such numbers, let alone as a pack working together. Dr. Huff was likely suspicious of this event and had hired Dr. Elwood Finch, who likely assisted with Dr. Huff's experiments. Patients under the care of Dr. Finch had escaped from the asylum a number of times. Interestingly enough, the patients were always brought back filled with gunshot injuries. The asylum workers expressed concern, but were never given answers. It is believed that Huff and Dr. Finch were experimenting with these patients, likely to uncover the mystery behind their immortality. This came to the point of the plague being dealt with negligently, or perhaps even actively prolonged by Dr. Huff, which led to many people questioning Huff's rule as the director of the American Hunters Association. Taking advantage of the growing disorder, Lynch murdered Huff. This sent the American Hunters Association into complete disarray. Many hunters acted on their own. Others, such as Dr. Jones, the Bone Doctor, and his voodoo community, the Reverend and his Christian influence, and Huff's men formed their own separate circles. Each of their group killed anyone that crossed their paths. As it stands, we are still uncovering what is happening. All of the journals, transcripts, and recordings of the lore itself were compiled at an unspecified date in the future, with no known endgame. Thank you for watching. If any of the monsters has piqued your interest and you want to learn more, you can check out my other videos. Each one provides an in-depth look at individual monsters. I hope you enjoyed this video. And again, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to check out my Ko-fi for further support. Very much appreciated.